Hey, what's up everyone? William here, and today we're going to be going over the EVOC 20 synthesizer that is included with Logic. So right off the bat, let me just say that this synth is different from the other ones that we've gone over already. This is a vocoder synth. So what that means is it takes an input signal and it analyzes it, and it uses the input signal to manipulate and change the sonic characters of the oscillators in the synthesizer. So you can get some really cool effects with that. I'm going to start off and I'm going to show you the audio sample we're going to be using later in this video in order to have this vocoder effect happen. But this is the kind of thing that like artists like Daft Punk are using and how they get that vocal effect. All of that is vocoders. So here's the audio signal that we're going to use.
Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up. Oh, get up.
So that's the audio signal we're going to be using in a little bit. I'll mute that again for now. It's just an Apple loop I found. I just searched vocals and it's the Carla Lyric 02. So if you want to use the same one, you can. So starting off, we'll start going over some of these parameters here. So very first of all, before we go over anything in the actual synth, I want you to look up here and see this side chaining option right here. Now what this right here is how you determine the input to the vocoder. And you need to have an input for a vocoder to, well, work like a vocoder, which I haven't said this, but vocoder is actually short for voice encoder. So that's something to keep in mind. So right now I can click on this, and then obviously it says all these inputs. And then also it says my audio track, audio 1, which is named Vox. So I'll just click that because that's the one we're going to use in a little bit. And then moving down below, we have this section right here, which this is the output parameters of the synth, of the vocoder. And right at the top, we have this signal, which it determines which signal we're listening to. Let me just record and enable this track real quick. And so right now, we have three options. We have VOC, which stands for vocoder. We have SYN, which stands for synth. And then we also have ANA, which stands for analysis. So most of the time you're going to be using VOC when you're using a vocoder because that stands for vocoder. We'll hear the output signal of the oscillators being manipulated by the input source that we have. But we can also set it to SYN and use it as a normal synth because that stands for synth. And then ANA is analysis, which that will be we'll be able to monitor the input signal that's coming into it. So SYN and ANA are typically used for monitoring purposes, but I mean they can be used. This really just depends on what you want to do. I'm going to leave it on SYN right now on the synthesizer option because right now, since we don't have anything playing, I can still use it like a normal synth, so that's cool. And so below this we have a basic level control, and then we also have this ensemble feature right here, which is 3 buttons. It's just different chorus-like effects that we can put. They're just different modes. So just experiment with that whenever you get the chance. And then beneath that, we have beneath this we have a stereo width knob here that'll adjust the stereo width of the sound. Moving over to the left side of the synth, we have some global parameters. We have poly mode, mono mode, and legato mode. So we've seen these before in some of the synthesizers we've worked with. We also have this voices slider again, where we can adjust the voices, and we have the unison button. So these are all things we should be pretty familiar with at this point. Down at the bottom, we have some more global parameters that we've seen before. We have a fine tuning right here that adjusts in cents. We have an analog knob that'll add some analog qualities to our sound. We have a glide knob that'll determine how long it takes to go from note to note. And then we also have a pitch bend range slider right here as well. So all things we've seen before so far. Next thing we have, these are the 2 oscillators and a cutoff filter right here. This is where the actual sound is happening. The synthesizer sound that we're getting right now. It's very saw wave sounding thing. So we have 2 modes, first of all, when it comes to these oscillators. We have 2 oscillators and we have 2 modes. So the first mode is FM, which stands for frequency modulation. And what that is it'll take wave 1, which is our first oscillator, and it will modulate it dependent on wave 2 to what it's set and what the ratios are, and this will determine the modulation amount. Or right here it says the FM intensity. So that's something that's really cool. You can get some cool sounds. Get some frequency modulation in there. And of course, we've seen this before. We have the 16, 8, and 4, which these adjust the pitch of the oscillator. Now, if we click on this FM button, it'll actually switch it to our other mode, which is dual mode. You can see oscillator 1 didn't change at all, but oscillator 2 changed. So now instead of frequency modulation, oscillator 2 is its own oscillator. It's its own entity that we can hear. It's not just modulating something. And we can adjust the semitones and detune it all. And then we have this slider is no longer frequency modulation intensity. It changed to balance. So we can decide a balance between these two. It's like a mixer. The top being oscillator 1 fully, the bottom being oscillator 2 fully, and then you can mix it in the middle. So let's play this real quick. So that's what that sounds like. And then right next to this, we have this noise level and color. And that's why we can hear noise right now, because it has some noise level on it. So we can adjust that how we want, if we want some noise in our sound. And then we can also change the color of the noise. So you can hear that noise, that white noise in the background changing how it sounds when I adjust the color knob. Next to this, we have this low pass filter here, which it's just a basic cutoff and resonance. We've seen this before, and then an attack and release dependent on how fast and how long we want the attack and release to be. Above this, we have the sidechain analysis. Now, this is something new. What this is it determines the attack and release of the input signal that we're getting, actually. So it determines how long it takes to analyze that, and then how long it takes to release that. So that's what these knobs do. You can adjust that and get some cool effects. And then also we have this freeze button, which if we click that, it kind of just completely ignores these two knobs. So it's just like how it was before. Moving on to the next section of the synth, we have this middle section, which is where the actual magic happens, right? We can adjust with this right here how many bands there are, which the higher the band count, the more precise or more clear the audio will sound, and less digitally. The lower the band count, the more digital sounding it will be. It's all just personal preference. That we also have these two filters for highest and lowest. It determines what kind of filter is set on the low and high frequencies. On bandpass mode, it's just going to be a bandpass filter of the whole thing. If we have a low pass and high pass, it'll be like a low pass covering up all the way to whatever this frequency is set to, and then a high pass going all the way to whatever the low frequencies are set to, being this frequency being the cutoff for the high pass, and this frequency being the cutoff for the low pass. So that's something to keep in mind, and we can adjust this to whatever we want to get the exact sound we're looking for. And we also have these knobs down here, form and stretch, which this will stretch out or shrink the bands, which will get some cool effects. We have a shift, which slides the bands left and right. And then we also have resonance, which will affect the resonance of the cutoffs. Underneath that section, we have two LFOs. We've seen LFOs before. We know how they modulate things now. We have one for the pitch, which you can set a range, and this is the intensity via a wheel, a mod wheel. And then we also have the rate, of course, which we can have to a free hertz mode, or a synced mode where it will sync to the beat, the BPM. And then we can also, of course, change the waveform of our LFO. And then this is pretty much the same, except rather than being able to set a range, we just have an intensity slider, and then also the same rate knob that we have here. And this will affect the shift. Moving on to our last section of our synth here, we have this UV detection area, which up here it's the sensitivity knob, which it determines how sensitive the vocoder is to picking up things in the audio signal. Then mode down here, this will be how it affects the unvoiced parts of the audio file, meaning the super quiet, the parts that are hard to hear. It'll determine whether it should use noise with it, or noise and synth with it, or blend the two together. It really is it really is something that you should experiment with, try the different modes. And then last but not least, we have this level, which it determines the level of the UV detection. So that's something that's cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to a preset. We're going to go in and we're going to use, let's use this electrified vocoder preset here. So right now you can see a bunch of things have changed. I'm going to just change it to the synth signal real quick though, so we can hear what it sounds like by itself. So that's what our synth sounds like. It sounds pretty cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to vocoder mode. Now I can go and I can click keys. Right now I'm clicking some of the keys, and as you can tell, nothing's happening. And that's because even though it's listening to audio 1 Vox channel for the input source to get the vocoder effect, right now nothing's playing. So I'm going to have this looped, and we can actually keep this muted. We actually want to keep this muted unless we're going to blend these two together. And so I'm just going to play this, and now it's going to be playing the audio. So whenever I hit a key when there's an audio signal happening, it will have the vocoder effect. So let me just... So we can get some cool effects with that, and we can, of course, adjust parameters as we want and go through different presets to get different sounds. But see, if we had this unmuted,
Get up, get up, get up.
on top of hearing the dry signal,
Get up, get up. Oh, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up, get up.
when I hit keys, we hear the dry signal and the wet signal. So that's something to keep in mind if you want to mix the two together and get some kind of mixture going between the two signals. But that about sums it up for the vocoder synth. Definitely mess with some different audio signals when you're messing with this synth, and definitely check out some of the presets in here. Vocoders are really cool things. It's one of my favorite vocal effects to use every once in a while, and the EVOC 20 is great for it. So I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a lot. See you next time.